Hello, my friends. Today's talk is called The Spiral of Collapse, and it's inspired by a speaker that I've been following on TikTok. Her name is Yashwani, and I will link her below. I bought one of her books, which was also titled The Subject of Collapse. I say also as if she named it after me, but it's the other way around. She named her book The Spiral of Collapse. And today I want to talk to you about this subject because there is a generally unknown idea about unhelpful psychology, where we generally consider ourselves to be pestered and bothered and kind of at the mercy of our unhelpful thinking. In fact, as of my creating this for you at this moment, I'm studying to become a psychotherapist, and I'm learning, therefore, about all of the different modalities of psychotherapy, the old school Freudian psychodynamic ones, the humanistic, existentialist, Gestalt ones, some of the postmodernist ones, and of course, CBT. And I think a few others are coming down the lane. So I'm getting a good sense of how professional psychotherapists deal with unhelpful psychology. And there are a number of ways of approaching it, but in my view, they all make unhelpful psychology more real than it actually is or has to be. There's actually an even more direct way of freeing ourselves from unhelpful psychology. And I can share this method with you. I've learned these methods from mystics such as Yashwani, and also from my own personal coach named Roxanne Kuciak and her company Creating Beyond. And I'll link that for you too, so you can get a sense of a more rounded sense of how this works. And the major problem that we're going to run into with this discussion is not about the efficacy of the technique and the principle that I'm going to share with you. The major problem that we're going to run into is your own incredulity. You will be unwilling to accept this from me because it's so simple that you will complain that it's too simple, and you will respond probably sarcastically and judge it before trying it out for yourself. For those of you who are open-minded, you are in for a very big treat, because you're about to find an extremely close shortcut to our work here, a close shortcut to the freeing of yourself from unhelpful psychology. And you'll do this by realizing very directly that your unhelpful psychology is not nearly as real and as substantial as you think it is. So that will do. That's what we're getting into. So if we're meeting for the first time, my name is Brent. I am a coach, a training psychotherapist. I also am a healer. And I use these and other mystical ideas that I come across to create what I call core energetics healing sessions. And if that's something you're interested in, there is a link for that below, and you can get your first one for free. So that's something definitely worth checking out. So I'm going to begin with Yashwani's idea of the spiral of collapse, and I'll just give you a quick overview of how she frames it. So she uses the term coherence, which is a very cool term that's been coming up in a lot of mystic circles lately. And the idea behind coherence is whether or not something exists in reality, this one that you and I are in right now, right here, the extent to which that thing is stable in this reality or unstable. So if it is stable in this reality, we could say that it is coherent. If it is unstable, then we would say it is incoherent. If it's unstable, that means it is trying to go. It's trying to die. It's trying to collapse. We would say, if it's unstable and incoherent, that it doesn't exist unless there is something propping it up and preventing that which is attempting to collapse from collapsing. If we were to take a very obvious example, it might be, let's just say you built a house of cards. And every time you let go of the house of cards, it's going to collapse. And so you can't let go. And so the house of cards only exists if you're holding it up. So that would be one example. But then other examples include ways of thinking, friendships, entire cultures, bureaucracies, countries, games, Traditions. A lot of them are stable. And if they're stable, they retain their freshness and their utility and they're good. But if they're unstable, then they become increasingly bloated and less helpful and further removed from their original intention. It is something that may have been appropriate at one moment, but is no longer appropriate. And so in order to attempt to make it coherent in this reality, as opposed to a former reality where it was naturally coherent, we have to keep bridging it. It reminds me a little bit, and this isn't a perfect example, but this will illustrate what I mean, of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which was made in the, its roots were in the 1960s and 70s with Skinner and Aaron Beck, who learned about how behavior affects your mental wellness and how your cognitions can be manipulated. But then, like a lot of these, they are being brought into a postmodern and a post-postmodern culture. We are in a evolving culture and we're in postmodern times. And so a lot of these things don't come in very neatly. And so now CBT is in what we call third wave, where it's bringing in mindfulness and existentialism and metacognition and these kinds of things in order to make it appropriate. But there are certain things that just cannot be brought into the future, and CBT may be one of them. Some of them can, though. Other examples are, as I mentioned earlier, like friendships. Like there are friendships where you're just together for a season and it's good, and then eventually it just feels more labored. You'll notice yourself not wanting to respond to their texts as much. You're kind of just going through the motions with them, and it just feels like it's not working. And so in a case like this, two things may happen. It may be the case that the friendship itself is attempting to collapse. It's just like both of you have you just moved on. And like it's completely fine. It can be completely healthy for a friendship to end. And of course, there's no law against a friendship rekindling later down the line, but just, it's perfectly fine. But it could also be the case that the friendship itself, the actual body of the relationship wants to stay together, but the basis of the friendship needs to be redone. It has to be built up from the bottom. An example of this might be like you're friends, but inside of your friendship, one of you kind of like bullies the other. Like one of you kind of makes these mean jokes and kind of thinks it's okay, and the other person goes, ha ha ha, yeah, that's really funny, but they're not really having a good time. And the person who's being bullied becomes increasingly fed up with it. And it's not exactly that the friendship has to end, but this behavior has to end. And if both of you feel like the friendship is based on this particular dynamic, it's like, oh yeah, I play this role, they play that role, and this is how we've always done it. Well then, it's not that the friendship has to fall apart, but like that thing needs to be redone. And that can be kind of, in these moments, it can be kind of scary and kind of troubling because it feels like you're losing a friend. You're not losing a friend. You're just allowing the structure of the friendship to die and be reborn. So that is it. That's the concept of the spiral of collapse. And so with it is the suggestion that it is perfectly fine and good and healthy to allow that which is dying to die on whatever level, whether it's like the structural level or inside of the structure. And she also says that this applies to pretty much everything. It's the code of collapse itself. So it was from her that this idea came, that it would happen to a company or a country or a culture or a friendship or a tradition or whatever. And so that would indicate how real this is and how much you can study this as a pattern across the cosmos. Very cool. Now, before we get into the applications, I want to share with you this idea of clearings, which I've hinted at in some of my videos. If you're a longtime viewer, then you may remember somewhat us talking about clearings, but just to catch us up to the present moment, a clearing is when you look at a piece of psychology and it pertains pretty much exclusively to psychology. So a belief, an idea, a piece of your identity, like anything that is made out of information that your mind has adopted and installed and believed and made real for better or for worse. So you would look at that thing and permit it to clear. So like, let's just say, for example, you have this belief about yourself that you're getting too old, and you're losing your physical ability, you're losing your mental ability, and you're getting too old to learn new tricks, to learn new things, and that you're kind of over the hill in some significant way. It's like, okay. And the problem with this is that when you believe this kind of thing, then it becomes a lens that you put on, and you automatically, unconsciously start seeking out evidence to further validate it. So when somebody like myself comes along to take this idea away, you've, over the last few months, have accumulated this body of evidence to indicate why your belief is true, right? So that's a cyclical kind of feedback loop problem that we run into. So what we would do in this case is we'd say, let's forget for a minute about what's objectively true. Let's, you and I, not make any claims about what is objectively true. And instead, let's assume for a minute that it's just an idea. Why not? Let's just play it out as an experiment. And then I would say to you, if I were your coach, I would say, are you willing to release this idea? Are you willing to let it go? And then if this is your first time, you'll say, no, because I don't want to lie to myself. I want to stick with what's true. I don't want to stick my head in the sand. I want to know the actual thing. And then I'd say, well, let's see if the symptoms go away once we clear the belief. In other words, let's see if your situation is actually real or if it's being created by your psychology, and we will do that by removing your psychology. And so if it's actually real, then we need not worry, because this apparently real thing will be able to withstand this little clearing. Everything will be fine. But then we also run the possibility of the thing actually going away because we cleared out the psychology that was maintaining it. Okay, and then you say, hopefully, all right, Brett, let's rock and roll. And then I say, okay. So everywhere that you hold and are invested in this idea that you're old, you're too old, you're over the hill, you're losing your ability, that you can't learn anything new, that your best days are behind you, your most productive days are behind you, would you be willing now to release that now? And you say yes. And I say, great. Permission now for this idea and this idea structure, like the kind of little conglomeration of ideas, to collapse. Permission for it to collapse now. In your imagination, permit it to just shrink down into nothing, resolve, dissolve, and complete it all. And this particular series of words is Roxanne's intellectual property. Resolve, dissolve, and complete it all. And so then in your imagination, observe as it does exactly that. Now the imagination piece here is very important because your imagination is real. I have a body of theory that I'm currently working on that I'm going to make a future video on just as soon as I can. But it's based on this idea from Ken Wilber's integral theory, where there is, of course, the objective reality out there, and there's the subjective reality in here. And there is a chauvinism, or in other words, there is a preferential thinking among modernists that the stuff that is objective is actually real, and the stuff that is subjective is not real, it's just subjective. And that word just really does a lot of heavy lifting. It really puts subjectivity in its place. So modernism is, of course, scientific rationalism. It's the one where we say the only thing that's real is the stuff like that we can measure and pick up with our senses, atoms and energy. And consciousness is just sort of a creation of atoms. It's not nearly as real as the atom, the atomic substrate. Does this make sense, right? So in our culture, the objective stuff we consider to be real, and the subjective stuff is just like, it's wishy-washy, it's not real or whatever. When in reality, there is an objective and subjective aspect of everything. And not only that, but there is an interaction between subjectivity and objectivity. So, and then this applies to our conversation, because when you imagine something Even though it's not real objectively, it is real subjectively. So you imagine this belief collapsing and being returned to the source of its origin. You imagine it dissolving in any way that you want to. For example, you might imagine it being put on a bonfire and burning up into smoke. You might imagine it being vacuumed up by God's vacuum and sucked into the light of source. You might imagine just the light of source, like just disappearing into God as like a big ball of light. But however you do it, that represents something real being done in your psychology. And then in so doing, the psychology is gone. It goes, and then you are free of it. Now, this applies beautifully to certain one-off beliefs. Now, if you go through a single clearing and you find you still have anxiety, you still have depression, or you're still grappling with alcoholism or something, it may be the case that this heavy mental, emotional configuration has a lot of strands. Like you can imagine like a spider's web, the way it's like it hangs on to a whole bunch of places to stay in spot, and you have to attack it from a few different angles. Nevertheless, that principle is that simple and is that easy. And the reason why is because incoherent psychology, which is life-denying psychology, i.e. any type of idea that just isn't suitable for you, any type of idea that is causing you pain, causing you suffering, causing you grief, causing you self-sabotage. So by believing it, you are sabotaging yourself. This is an incoherent idea and is thus subject to collapse. The only reason why it hasn't collapsed yet is because you believe it. So our job now is to stop believing it. And we do this because the sarcastic ones among you will say, "Oh wow, Brent thinks I'm cured." But really, it is that simple. It's just a matter of remembering and remembering/allowing that you are in charge of your psychology. And not, by the way, none of this can be done. And I include all psychotherapy. None of this can be done unless you are willing to accept that you are, in some sense, in charge of your psychology. Does this mean you have perfect control over all of your thoughts all the time? No, of course not. But it is somewhat like being in charge of a child, a toddler, or your dog, or in charge of like your car. You know, when you're driving through a city, are you completely in control of everything? No. But are you in control? Yes. So that's how that goes. So that is pretty much what I came here to say. So to bring this all together, unhelpful psychology is incoherent and is subject to collapse. And so you can do this with anything. So like take a habit that you're struggling with. Like a lot of clients that I work with really want to get organized and get productive. So, okay, are you finding it hard to maintain routines and rhythms and habits? Are you finding it hard? What do you believe about these things? Do you believe setting habits are hard? Do you believe like you're not able to do it? Do you believe that setting structures and habits for yourself is too much like control and you want to feel free all the time? Just ask yourself honestly, in what way is my psychology sabotaging me? Journaling exercise, or just ask questions like the ones I did now. And then when your beliefs become apparent to you, just take a quick moment to ask yourself, is this belief authentic to me? Is this belief serving my growth? Is it serving my evolution? Or is it keeping me locked in place? And anything that's keeping you locked in place, anything that's sabotaging you, is subject to collapse. And the only thing that's needed is for you to permit it to do so. If you are interested in our one-on-one work, there's a link below. Your first session's free. I have a free PDF on self-actualization. It's on my website, brentharris.com. Please hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much.